All right, then we'll start. I'd like to say hello to everyone. My name is Grace Hollett. I'm a past president of CFUW, the Canadian Federation of University Women, and a member of CAMEUS. And CAMEUS will be explained in a few minutes by someone else. So that's a collaborative group, and you'll find out about it. And I will be moderating. And I'm going to also introduce the first panelist in a few minutes. But first, Paige Inglis, CFUW's advocacy coordinator, will speak to the Zoom protocols for this meeting. Paige, please.
Sure, thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. Just some housekeeping. Just so you know that this will be recorded and posted on the CFUW YouTube page, as well as some other channels through CAMEUS. If you would not like to be in the recording, just please turn your cameras off. Please stay muted throughout the presentation so that we can hear our speakers clearly. The presentations will primarily be in English. However, there will be some slides in Spanish, as well as Glenda speaking a bit of Spanish as well. If you could put your questions in the chat, we will get to them at the end. I think that's anything. If you need anything, just let me know.
Thank you, Paige. So Barbara Dumoulin, the VP International Relations for CFUW, who is from British Columbia, is going to introduce CAMEUS and also the session. So Barbara, please.
It was one thing about having somebody else share the screen. I don't have my notes anymore. Okay, welcome to our session, our virtual session of CSW67 for CAMEUS on digital education, lessons learned, and innovations introduced. So next slide, please. I'm not going to try and read it in Spanish. You probably noticed that my throat is slightly gone here. Okay, so what is CAMEUS? CAMEUS is an acronym. It stands for the three federations that are in the North American region. That is Canada, the CA, Canadian Federation of University Women, Mexico, ME, Federación Mexicana de Universitarias, and my apologies for the Spanish, and USA, that's the US, Women Graduates USA. So we have come together to focus on problems, situations, discussions that are unique or pertain primarily to our region. So what we have focused on before was actually the migration and the issues that are involved with migration, refugees, and detention and such not. So that was our particular set for last year. Next slide, please. CAMEUS is an informal organization or collaboration. However, this year at the Mexican mission, we signed a memorandum of understanding, and this is this is a section of a video of us signing that actual memorandum. So now we have a formal agreement to work together. Next slide, please. Our topic for today is on education. Education, as you know, SDG 4, is a primary focus for ourselves and has been certainly with CFUW. It was critical to the beginning of our organization, but it is a focus for our GWI and for all of us are combined. So the topic today is digital education. And certainly we can't discuss education today without considering what the effects of digital or online education mean for teachers, for staff, and for students. So it's lessons that we learned from the pandemic and the innovations that were introduced as a result of it. So there's nothing like adversity to bring out the best in some of us in terms of how the innovations, as we have mentioned here, to create something new or to make a situation that is first perhaps was chaotic, perhaps more workable for everyone. Next slide, please. We have three speakers or three panelists today. We have Glenda Hecksher, who is an artist from Mexico, who is going to be focusing not on education in the K-12 sense, but in terms of lifelong education and how they use their platform from their Museo de la Mujer to promote lifelong learning. Alison Edwards, our first one, Grace will be introducing her in a moment. She will be discussing how she used our adapted practices within her classroom. And Dr. Margie Moriarty is an administrator, and she'll speak from that particular issue. There's one thing that I've left out in terms of discussing CAMEUS. You may have noticed that, can you go back a couple of slides, please? And one more. One more, please. There you go. If you look at the upper left-hand side, you'll see our logo, which is 3 monarch butterflies. That's one for each of our organizations. So why choose the monarch butterfly, which, you know, appears to be fragile, but in fact is not. I mean, they migrate a total of 3,000 miles from Canada or northern part of USA to the mountains in Mexico. So it's an apt symbol for our organization because it brings out the uniqueness of the 3 of us working together. And together we are strong. We may appear to be fragile like the butterflies, but butterflies are not fragile at all. Okay, I think I have to stop. You can tell that I'm not exactly at my best today. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Grace Hollett to introduce our first speaker.
There you go. Okay, got
we
it.
got it. Okay.
Grace, you're muted.
Okay, I'm introducing our first panelist, Alison Edwards, and Alison is a teacher and English Language Arts Department head here at O'Donnell High School in Mount Pearl, Newfoundland and Labrador in Canada. When we met at her school in January, she spoke of student choice and empowerment and how she embraced the challenges of teaching during the COVID period. I mean, we know there were many challenges and there were many ways to deal with them, and she embraced them. Alison actually, in 1995, at the age of 18, she went as an assistant with the Newfoundland and Labrador delegation to the UN World Conference of Women and the NGO Forum on Women in Beijing. And of course, we hear a lot about that event. Alison's degrees are from Memorial University of Newfoundland here in St. John's, and she has a Bachelor of Arts in English with theatre and music and a Women's Studies minor. She has a Bachelor of Education for teaching in the intermediate and secondary levels, and that's in English and Social Studies. And she has a Master's of Education in Teaching and Learning, specializing in society, media, and culture. Now, although Alison resides here on the island of Newfoundland near the Atlantic Ocean with her husband and son, she is also a proud non-resident member of NGOCSW67, the territory of the Inuit of the central and southern Labrador part of the province. In her free time, Alison geocaches and reads young adult literature. We welcome her as a champion of student choice and empowerment. Alison, you have up to about 18 minutes to present. So
Thank you so much, Grace. I'm just going to share my screen here. Thank you everyone for joining us today. So I'm going to talk about my experiences with education during COVID and just basically lessons that I learned and innovations that I had to introduce and opportunities that I took for my own learning and development.
There's a lot of turbulence going on around the world.
Okay, so before I begin, however, I would like to acknowledge the lands on which I'm speaking are situated in the traditional territories of the diverse Indigenous groups and acknowledge with respect the diverse histories and cultures of the Beothuk, the Mi'kmaq, the Innu, and the Inuit of this province. So I live in Newfoundland and Labrador. When you look at Canada, Newfoundland and Labrador is the province over on the most eastern side. Right, we're in this circle. Labrador is connected to the mainland and Newfoundland is an island here. So when I look at my particular experiences and why I'm here, well, I'm the English department head at O'Donnell High School in Mount Pearl. This is a city just outside of St. John's, our capital city. Prior to this year, and for 17 years before this one, I was an English language arts teacher at Prince of Wales Collegiate in the capital city, St. John's. Both are part of Newfoundland and Labrador English School District. They both have diverse populations. PWC, where I was until the end of last year, has a strong Learn and EAL program, and about 10 to 15% of its 600 student population is made up of these EAL and Learn students who have come from a variety of places around the globe. In Mount Pearl, we have a number of international students who have come to St. John's and Mount Pearl, to Newfoundland generally, to have a cultural experience away from their first or their home country. And both have populations that are fairly equally divided between identified male and identified female. I would say that the population of teachers at O'Donnell has a higher population of female teachers than they do male teachers, but at PWC, it was fairly equally divided. So I spend my time teaching literature to students from grades 10 to 12. I'm also a reader. I read around 300 books a year. Most of them are young adult literature. And some of this is because I enjoy it the most, and other parts of it is because I really want to make sure that I'm looking for the best ones for students. What is the best that I can do in terms of meeting the diverse needs of my students? So I've always been a little offbeat, right? And those who've worked with me will could talk to you about how I've been a little unconventional. I believe strongly in student choice novels, and I have for many years, ensuring that the novels that I offer students, they have choice in what they read. I've minimized Shakespeare because, you know, I feel that there may be other people out there who have written plays. And so I've found different ones to share with my students, often more modern, but still with enduring stories and characters. Then, as it all happens, COVID hit and everything got to be a little unconventional. Everything had to change. Everything was flipped upside down. So for us, March 13th, 2020, so just a little over, a few years ago, it was our last day of school. We didn't know it at that day. That weekend, the government announced a closure for an undetermined amount of time. They decided that, that weekend that we would be closed. We did not know exactly how long it would be. So we sprung into action at that point. March 27th, 2020 was our goal to begin online learning. And that ended up continuing for the rest of the year. Because of that, all students were given an academic pass and all exams were canceled. Excuse me for 1 second. So the 2 weeks in between that time, we spent a lot of time contacting our students, making sure that they were in our Google Classrooms because we are a Google district, and making sure that they had the technologies that they needed. If students needed technologies, then they were loaned ones from the school. If they didn't have Wi-Fi or access to the internet, we found ways with different devices to ensure that they would have access. And so that was put into place to make sure that there was an equitable technology distribution for students, especially in some of the lower income areas that were serviced by my school at that point. When June 22nd came around, that was the last day of school. We had continued on to that point online. All students ended up being successful in their courses because the thought was that, you know, with this disruption, we didn't know how they would have done. And so because of that, everyone was successful in the course and they had to return all their borrowed technology. So that was that kind of panicked time in the spring of 2020. However, and this is, you know, something that I've kind of taken to place, it also meant that I had time to read, I had time to reflect, I had time to connect, and I had time to think. While putting everything together for online learning was difficult, and while we had to do so many things, not just to get students connected, but also to get teachers connected, there was still that time, and there was still that opportunity to look at what was happening and the normal that we had, and decide what we wanted to do with that normal at this point. Did I want to return to the same normal that we had on March 13th, 2020? And that reading and reflection time really made me consider, well, what can I do with this? How can I address the needs of my students the best? And so I found myself connecting with more people via Twitter and via Facebook, having Google Meets, working with them with different technologies and talking to them about how they were using it. I've always been somewhat tech inclined, and so during that time I did my Google certificates level 1 and 2, and through my school and through the district ran a few PLs on that, but really took time to think about what I wanted to return to when we did return. So some of the quotes that I read during that time were ones that really resonated with me. And the first was this one that I randomly found on Facebook, and I can't even attribute it to anyone at this point. And it's the idea that engaging students means getting kids excited about our content and our interest in curriculum. I went, well, okay, I've been engaging and kind of going, hey, I love this. I think you should too. But that idea, and what I've come to speak of more and more, is the idea of empowering students and giving them the knowledge and skills to pursue their passions, their interest, and their future, right? And that idea that kids need to be empowered, not engaged, right? It has to be flipped to them and have them empowered about what it is that they're doing, their interest, be able to name what it is they want to do and what they like and what they don't like, and to work with it. The other quote that really stood out to me was by Shay Martin, who presented this at an English teachers conference and then shared it on Twitter, where I found it, and talked about selfie pedagogy, that kind of idea that pedagogy can sometimes be not student-centered. Often it's filtered by educators' experiences and interests, and it can be kind of disguised as good intentions or cool ideas. So again, that idea of engagement as opposed to empowering, right? And so that idea that, you know, we're teaching something because it's good for them as opposed to because it's something that will help them be good for themselves. So during all this time, you know, time's still going on, COVID is still very present, but in fall 2020, our schools returned with restrictions. So they returned full-time in person. There were a number of restrictions. There were arrows on the hallway floors. People had to wear masks. There were rules about how many people could be in a room together during independent time. I didn't return in September. As an asthmatic, I had concerns and I spent time instead. I was at home. I was waiting for plexiglass to be installed on my desk. And so I returned to school in December.
There's a lot in today's conversation about focus.
Hi.
Yeah.
With that, interactions with my classes began really, I was working with them through Google Classroom. And it reminded me that on my return, this need to connect and make learning relevant and engaging was super important to me, was something that I really had to take the time to do and readjust, you know, take this idea of returning to normal and throw it out the window and figure out a new normal. So my process was I first discussed it with students, like, what do you want in an English class? What do you want from school? I then got suggestions from them and I gathered suggestions like, what would you like as an English course? What would be a good thing? What would you like to see? I researched different types of instruction and classroom management. I consulted with other teachers, with specialists in the field. I, talked to different department heads. I talked to program specialists and figured out what is it that they're doing that can be something I can adapt for me. I then shared my findings with my department and I began planning. So I took the rest of the 2020-2021 school year to start that planning and figuring out, well, what can I provide for students that is based on the voices of these students? So my ultimate goal emerged, that idea of empowering students and addressing the systemic learning gaps. As we returned to school, there were a number of students with learning gaps, simply because there's always that break between classes. And there were some students that when we went online, it was less successful for them or less engaging for them than it was for others. And so I had to think about, well, how am I addressing these gaps? How am I empowering them to address the gaps themselves and to recognize their needs? So we went online in February 2021. When we returned to school in April, it was in hybrid format. So half the class was there one day, the other half is online, and they alternated days. And we finished that year in hybrid. 2021, 2022 starts in person in September, just to give you a sense of how learning was in regards to the impact of COVID at that time. However, one thing that was done to help and address some of the gaps was that the government did give students from grades 7 to 12 Chromebooks for their use while they're students within the NLESD system. They return them once they graduate or if they move to a different province. And so it made it easier then, even though we were hybrid, to continue this kind of research and talking with students and develop my ideas during that hybrid time, right? It also reinforced to me the reasons why I was doing this and looking at that engagement and empowerment idea that was so important to me, or is so important to me. I then read another quote, which I really loved, and that idea from Pernille Rip, that our job is to create rooms filled with students' voices, not to be the main voice. And I took that to heart, especially as we were online, and we always knew that we could go online again at any other point, and trying to make sure that the students' voices were still being empowered and heard while we were in such a state of flux. So one thing I did was I surveyed my students, and I started by giving them 20 questions about English. And so here's a selection of some of the results from them. When I asked students, I would like to pick more of the works I analyzed, where 1 was not at all and 5 was very much so. You can see that most of them wanted to be involved in picking the works they analyzed. They wanted to be involved in having a say in what pieces they worked with. When I asked, I like having choice in what books we study, again, a very strong majority said yes, they like having that choice. They want to have choice in what they study, in the books that they have. They don't just want me to hand them something. I think we do the same thing in English every year, which was a common complaint that I heard, and I wanted to just see what the results would be like. Again, the majority of them saying the same thing. They feel we do the same thing in English every year, that we have all of these genre-based units where we do poetry, and the next year we do poetry, and the year after that we do poetry, and then we do Shakespeare. And they felt that that was really, English was just doing the same thing over and over and over again. I feel the works we read reflect me as a person. And this one made me really sad when I saw it, because most of them said, no, not at all, or not really. Very few felt that, yes, they were reflected as a person within the works that they read. I like to have choice in my assignments. Again, most of them wanted choice. They want choice in how they do something and how they demonstrate their knowledge. And when I asked, I would prefer to be more involved in the grading of my work, a lot of them really wanted to be involved. They wanted to have a say in their final results. And that to me really stood out, because I'm the curriculum expert. And I tell this to students all the time, like, assessment is a conversation. I'm in the room as the curriculum expert, but they're the expert on their work. So why wouldn't they want to be involved with the grading of their work? And then I asked them, I enjoy doing classic works of literature, such as Shakespeare, Sophocles, and Bronte, more than modern ones. So like Lin-Manuel Miranda or Jason Reynolds or Maya Angelou. And most of them said, no, not at all. They like doing the more modern pieces. And I thought, okay, that's, it's one thing to suspect this and kind of go, oh, I wonder. But when you see that students are saying, and with such strong responses in terms of what side of the, the side of the scales that are being indicated there, it really made me think about, what is it that I can do now as we're entering a new normal, for me to create a new normal that has students at the forefront and empowered in terms of their curriculum. What I really learned is that students want choice, they want representation, they want inclusion, they want to feel like they're part of the class, that they're part of the curriculum experience. So what I needed to do, I needed to change. I needed to develop, and I needed to guide. I had to go from being that sage on the stage that people talk of to that guide on the side. And one of the teachers I talked with gave me that saying, and I kind of went, my goodness, that's exactly it. How can I guide them through their curriculum so that it is something that reflects them? So I took the results from the students, I examined the curriculum. I got into looking at deep learning and universal design for learning in the hopes of finding inspiration for planning and ideas. And I consulted with experts in the field for advice, help, and guidance. So while COVID's still raging and still going on, I kind of went, no, what can I do to make things change? How can I bring people into a different class? So this change had to happen. So there was planning. I needed to consider how to meet the outcomes of the course, our curriculum guides, and develop analytical skills. Assessing still had to happen. It couldn't just be a free-for-all, right? So I started looking at the idea of standards-based assessment with more formative and more student-based summative work. And organization. I had to figure out how to organize my course and how to organize my classroom to make a COVID-safe room that still had a student focus, not a teacher focus. So with that, I developed larger units to take more time for discussion and instruction. I designed flexible assessments, so they met the curriculum, but they were more open to interpretation. They were more open to students being able to show me their strongest way, how they understood the information. I went with themes, not genres, so that they could see the interconnectedness of different pieces of work. so that it wasn't just here are poems and they're together and here are essays that they are together, but let's look at this topic of the power of your actions. And let's do a play with this, as well as some poems, as well as an essay, to look at how they're all connected. And then I looked at feedback as a focus. So with standard-based grading and success criteria versus percentages, but also that idea of formative assessment. So assessment that isn't given a grade necessarily, but is just given feedback, so that it isn't counted at the end, but is more practice before they get to the part that counts at the end. So I mentioned a few things that I focused with. One was deep learning. So deep learning is a way of looking at education that looks at student engagement and learning for all. You combine your pedagogical practices, your learning partnerships, your learning environment, and how you leverage digital to help address gaps within, or continue to develop within success within your classroom. As well, you take a look at kind of the vision and values of it all. So the idea that teachers are learners, the idea of examining your instructional practice, the idea of collective efficacy, both between teachers and students, or between students, really. Making sure that you have an optimal learning environment, making sure you have wellness and positive relationships at the forefront, making evidence-based decisions, not doing things just because it's how we've done them, and examining your assessment practice and looking at how it is that you are assessing. So that I wanted to explain a few of the things that I mentioned as focus. That's one of them. Another one is universal design for learning, which is a way of thinking about teaching and learning that gives all students an equal opportunity to succeed. It offers flexibility in the ways students access material, engage with it, and show what they know. It provides materials in a variety of formats from a variety of sources. It gives students a variety of ways to express their knowledge. And it looks at engagements. The choice and connection to their lives can happen within the assessments. Like, for example, I just gave a poetry assessment, and I said to them that the goal is for them to show me their understanding of literary devices and literary terms and how they are used in poetry. So they could do a podcast about a poem. They could write a poem in 2 languages, talking about their life experience. They could illustrate one of the poems and show with a focus on imagery and show their understanding that way. Or they could link different resources to the themes of the poem. So there was digital in there, but they could also do it on paper if that was better for them. They could speak their information, or they could write, but all of it fit the same goal and gave a number of different ways for them to represent their understanding. And standard-based assessment. This was a success criteria I used last year, where basically students are given a standard they've reached in terms of their understanding. So I look at it instead of going, oh, that's 85. I would say, oh, you're meeting what I want from you here. You're showing me you can do it and that you have an understanding of what it is that we're trying to do in this course. Work is phrased as I can versus students will. So I can write a strong thesis statement, for example, as opposed to students will demonstrate their understanding by writing a strong thesis statement. And at the end, a numerical grade is given based on the work and knowledge development shown throughout the full course. And I do that through conferencing with the students. Where do they think they land? Where do I think they land? And we discuss it and come up with a numerical grade at the end. I then looked at my classroom organization and I moved to desks in group of 4. At this point, we were at a point where we were allowed to do this. They were still wearing masks, but the way that the 4 worked out, they were far enough apart from each other that it worked out. I ensured that all the pictures on my walls were representative of my students and their backgrounds. I made sure there were not just males and females, both cisgender and transgender, but also that there were a number of different backgrounds of different nationalities. I tried to make the room welcoming and inviting for students visually. Right. And then I received a grant for some makerspace materials so that they had a way to participate using digital leverage within different assignments without having to have the materials at home. So like one of my assignments, they have to make something representing a symbol from a play. And so my 3D printer doesn't stop that week as they design things, and it prints for that. So with all of this, I had wonderings. It's like, had the students been through too much turmoil with COVID for this to be effective? Despite having supports from admin in the district, did I have enough for the students to also buy in? Were the learning and behavioral gaps ones that I could address through these methods? Or was it better to go back to normal and not progress to a new normal? But then with that, I talked to my students, and I had one student say to me about an assignment, "Oh, miss, I wasn't going to do it." But when I realized it's all about me, I knew I could. I went, "Oh, okay, that's something." Right. And then another student said, "Well, when the desks moved into tables, that's when I changed, because they started working together and they started considering each other's ideas. And that gave them an understanding of the strength of their own ideas." Another kid said, "Sneaky, miss, it's all about perspective." And I went, "Okay, yeah, cool, catching on." There were a lot of proud moments for them and for me as we discussed their final marks. And so we talked it out. We looked, how did they progress? Did they show learning? Did they show that they had a growth in their understanding? And one student said, or actually they wrote it down and told me, they said, "Before I used to just study the terms, write the answers and do the work. When you said there were no tests, no grades at the start, I wanted to go throw up. As the course went on, I started to realize I was using what you were teaching in my other classes. Discussion of and application of the terms meant I understood them more and I wasn't just reciting them. I like it." And for me, I thought, okay, it's new, but it's trying to form that new normal. We had opportunities in COVID to try to return to where we were or to build this new normal. So for me, it was a perspective shift. And if I hadn't shifted my perspective, none of this would have been possible or effective. If I hadn't had this break and kind of went, oh, well, what is it we're returning to? Then none of these changes would have been possible. But as well, like COVID, there were so many horrible things that came from COVID. But the time to examine and change to make a new normal, it was invaluable. And it's something now I'm at a new school and working with the kids to build this as the culture and working with my staff to build this as the culture. And it's interesting now to see that, yeah, bringing this new normal is necessary, that the kids are going, "Oh yeah, I really like this. This is good." Right. So thank you all for listening. I have a number of people there on this thank you screen. But there have been so many people that have been so helpful along the way. I hope I haven't gone too far over my time and that everything I've said has been clear. But if not, I look forward to interacting with you during the questions and answers. Thank you so much and have a great day.
Grace, you're muted.
Thank you very much. I think you have some very lucky students. And really, I wish I could have been your student. It would have been good. Thank you so much. I'm now going to call on Dr. Faye Weber, who is from WG USA, Women Graduates USA, and a former president, actually, of that group. And Faye is going to introduce our next speaker. Faye, please.
I just want to say thank you to Alison. Oh my goodness, what a creative and thoughtful teacher and leader. Thank you so much for your presentation. Good afternoon, and I was introduced, Faye Weber, with Women Graduate USA. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Margie Moriarty, who I worked with for over a decade. Margie has a no-nonsense leadership style that gives special attention to students who experience difficulties learning, have behavior problems, or working their way through a traditional school setting is extremely difficult. Her positive influence with addressing the needs of these students is felt within the Whittier Union High School District, the LA County, and the state of California. Margie earned her doctorate in education for social justice from the University of Redlands in 2011. She has worked with at-promise students in multiple California high schools for 29 years. She is a two-time recipient of the Administrator of the Year Award from the California Continuing Education Association and has served as chair for 30 public school accreditation committees in California and Hawaii. She is currently the principal of Frontier High School in Whittier, California, which has been awarded California Model Continuation Schools status 3 times under her leadership. She is also principal for the Sierra Vista High School Independent Study and Whittier Union High School Adult School. I'm proud to present Dr. Margie Moriarty.
Thank you so much, Faye. I'm going to share my screen as well. And I am going to speak in English, and I thank you for the assistance with the Spanish translation that's on the slides. And hopefully we can all see the right slide. As Faye said, I've been working for the Whittier Union High School District for a number of years as an administrator. And at the time that we went out for COVID onto distance learning, which was the same auspicious day that Alison had in Canada, we went out on Friday the 13th of March 2020, a date that we will not forget. What we learned during the pandemic, and it took us over 2 years to return to what we would consider our new normal, is that we needed to, in US terms, we needed to Maslow before Bloom. And that means that we needed to meet the students' physiological and psychological needs before we could go back to increasing the rigor of what they were learning in the classroom. So at the time that we went out in March of 2020, Whittier Union High School District had 11,200 students and about 500 staff members. Our students are 89% Hispanic, 6.2% white, and a little bit of a few other populations. 69.1% of our students qualify under the federal free and reduced lunch program here in the United States, and 9.1% of our students are English learners. In my alternative settings, my numbers are higher than that. So typically Frontier High School, our continuation is number 2 in the district in poverty level and number 1 in the district in English learners. Whittier Union High School District has been studied by Rick DeFore and Michael Fullen. And we have 5 traditional high schools, 2 alternative high schools, and 2 adult school programs, one for specifically special education students ages 18 to 22, and then our adult classes. Our motto here in Whittier Union is that demographics do not determine destiny. I'd like to talk a little bit about how the funding that we got assisted us. So the format of the program is kind of the access that we had to funds, and then how we leveraged those resources. The federal government gave money to the state government. So in the United States, there is the US Department of Education. Each of the 50 states has their own state Department of Education. And the states had some opportunity to be creative with what they did with the money. What we got in California, technology devices and technology services. We were lucky that our school district was already flush with Chromebooks. We had enough of them in my own alternative schools that we were able to send home a Chromebook with every one of my students and every one of my staff members so that everyone was able to continue working and learning. We were already a Google district using the Google Suite for Education, Google Docs, Google Slides, and so forth. And we added to that Google Voice. One of the things that we felt was really important was for the ability of parents and students to call the school and call our staff members and actually reach a live person. So that was, Google Voice allowed us to do that. And people were able to forward their phone calls directly onto that Google Voice number and answer from home without having to give out personal phone numbers. We also chose the Zoom platform for doing our distance learning work, and we continue to use that to this day. One of the most important things that we leveraged was our own resources, which were primarily people and time. So when we went out on Friday the 13th, essentially the schools closed down, and for a week, teachers had the opportunity to start to work on revamping what they were going to do. We were lucky that we already had a robust professional development department in our district and also an educational technology department. And those two departments work together with some of our most tech savvy teachers. Alison talked about becoming Google certified. We have a number of Google certified teachers in the district who are already doing great work. And they came together and provided online professional development for teachers. We made the decision to have all of our teachers either post their work through their district website or through Google Classroom. And that was the district decision. My decision for my students was that all of my teachers were going to use Google Classroom because all but one of them already was. So my teacher who wasn't got assigned a one-on-one mentor, because for me, it was more important that the students use the product that they were used to, and I could easily get my one teacher trained up on Google Classroom. So that was our next step, and that was our next week. And then we had spring break, which truthfully, the teachers were all working through to get ready to relaunch school in an online format. What I did on my campus, my small campus, I'm really lucky as the alternative high school principal in the district. I have some opportunity to make some innovative changes because I have a small staff, and it's easier to get a small group of folks to buy in than a larger high school that has over 100 staff members. One of the things that I do is I follow Casey Bell through Shake Up Learning. And I knew that Wuhan had already gone out to distance learning because of COVID, and I knew it was inevitable that it would reach us at some point. So the day that LA Unified closed, which was Wednesday, the 11th of March, 2020, as soon as Los Angeles Unified School District in California, the largest school district in California and the second largest in the United States, closed, I knew it was inevitable that we were closing as well. So I listened to her podcast with some American teachers that had been teaching in Wuhan and listened to what was important and what they needed from their administrators to make this transition. One of the things they talked about was Google Classroom, and that influenced strongly my forcing my teachers to go that direction. We also reduced the number of classes per term that students were going to take. So in March of 2020, the traditional high schools essentially froze students' grades, and they could participate in 30-minute per class period Zoom lessons, and they could continue to work to raise their grades, but nobody's grade was going to fall. That wasn't an option in alternative education, where my students take new classes every 9 weeks, and they need to do that because they are credit deficient toward graduation. So we reduced the number of classes that my students were taking to try to keep them engaged. And that worked really well for us. So that summer of 2020, when teachers came together to work also through the Zoom platform on professional development to talk about what it was going to look like in the fall, because it was pretty rapidly apparent in California, in Los Angeles County in particular, that we were not coming back to school in the fall of 2020. So we worked together to push out essentially that innovative idea district-wide. And our students took just 3 classes per 9-week quarter for the entire 2020-2021 school year, because our research indicated that the students had not been active on all 6 of their classes from April through June of 2020. They had picked and chosen what classes to attend online, and that wasn't an option for fall. We needed every student to be in every class in order to pass every class. We reopened schools in the spring of 2021 to a small group of students. So those students were selected based on need, students with individualized education plans, students with disabilities, low-income students, homeless students, foster students, our most at-risk students that most needed that opportunity to come back to school in person. And we had them coming in small groups in April and May of 2021. And then we reopened school for everyone in the fall of 2021. When we reopened, one of the things that we got from the federal government, there was a lot of money coming to us for personal protective equipment. All of our classrooms had sanitation, all of our classrooms had increased airflow, air purifiers, free COVID testing on campus for anyone who wanted it. We ran COVID vaccine clinics on campus for anyone who wanted it. And we increased our staffing so that the adult to student ratio was increased. We added a social worker to every campus to help with the mental health needs of both the students and the staff coming back. In Los Angeles County, particularly among Hispanic and African-American populations, the number of COVID hospitalizations and deaths was significant. And we knew we were dealing with a lot of people who had been through a lot of loss and a lot of trauma. So that's where quite a bit of money went, was into those social workers and increasing our social emotional learning and our mental health connections for staff and students returning from the pandemic. And we spent a lot of time talking about student re-engagement. And then there was also federal money for learning loss, because even though we did our absolute best to keep students engaged in 3 classes at a time on Zoom, and everyone had a Chromebook and everyone had access to an internet hotspot, there were still students for whom that format just didn't work well, and they did not pass all of their classes. So coming back, we did a lot of after-school tutoring, a lot of after-school credit recovery, placed extra tutors into English, math, and science classes where students had struggled the most. And that was all from federal money that we received. In our district, we talked a lot about Maslow before Bloom, and Maslow talks about the need to meet basic safety needs and physiological needs before people can move up and become self-actualized or be their best selves. Bloom talks about academic rigor and the depth of knowledge that we want our teachers to tap into from the students. So some of the things that Alison described, going from some of the old worksheets and multiple choice into truly asking the higher level thinking skills of how does this impact your life? What is your perspective on that? We recognized that we really needed to meet our students' physiological and mental health needs. Throughout the United States, all students qualified for free breakfast, lunch, and after school snacks from the day we went out on the COVID pandemic through the end of this school year. Prior to that, students only qualified for the free or reduced lunch based on family income. So that went away for a few years so that we could feed every single student every single day. And that was incredibly important because so many people in Los Angeles County were out of work during the COVID pandemic. We also put a lot of energy into social emotional learning and teaching our teachers how to make those connections with students, providing curriculum for having class discussions, and then really just reinforcing Rick DeFore, who is one of the researchers who has studied our district. He talks about rigor, relevance, and relationships in education. And we really needed to change that around and first talk about relationships and reestablishing the relationships between students and their teachers whom they had never met in person. And that once those relationships were reestablished, then we could show the students how the work that they were doing was relevant to them, which again is a lot of what Alison talked about. And only after the relationships were established and the students saw the relevance of what they were being asked to do in the classroom, could we increase the rigor. And that's how we approached reopening our schools. One of the things that we have seen from the COVID pandemic, similar again to what Alison experienced in Canada, is the digital acceleration. We will never go back to 100% paper pencil. It was fantastic to, as difficult as it was to move some of our staff who were not digital natives into the digital space that students live in. It was just incredibly powerful to get there. We really have accelerated by 5 years over a 12-month period what people can do with technology. And digital tools are now essential to our way of life and education. Everyone's digital skills have improved. We hired additional help desk people for students and staff. And we are better preparing our students now for post-secondary education the way it exists in the United States. Because for most of our college students here in the United States, they will have to take at least one online class as part of their collegiate experience. And now they're better prepared to do that. Oops, what happened? Sorry about that. Move that over again. Yeah, that was my last slide. I apologize. That was, those are our takeaways, that we are digitally better than where we were. We have continued our work on mental health initiatives, and I don't think we'll ever go back to a place where students are anonymous people in classrooms. At least I hope not. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Margie. Okay, thank you very much. That was very enlightening. And we're now going to call on Lucia Guzman from the Mexican Federation, from FEMU, and she is going to introduce our next speaker. Lucia, please.
Good morning, afternoon, evening, dear friends. My name is Lucia Guzman, past Secretary General at the Mexican Federation of University Women. And I would like to introduce Glenda Hecksher, our final panelist in today's CAMEUS parallel event. Glenda Hecksher was born in Mexico City. She is the proud mother of 2 daughters, the grandmother of 3 boys and girls. Glenda's mother, an elegant 99-year-old lady, lives with her. And she is the immediate past GWI Vice President for both membership and marketing. And currently, she is the Mexican Federation of University Women's Vice President for International Affairs and CAMEUS representative. As a visual artist, Glenda has dedicated all her life to creating paintings and sculptures that include small pieces as well as impressively large ones in bronze that adorn spaces in many universities, towns, and cities around the world. Of course, she designed the CAMEUS logo. Some of her works can be seen in Mexico City's Women's Museum. And it is precisely on this museum that her presentation on digital education is about. Because the Women's Museum, besides being a beautiful space of art, is also a space of education outside the classroom. Glenda, the microphone is all yours.
Thank you so much, my dear Lucy, and thanks to everybody who's here with me. I'm so happy to be with you again. Thank you for being here. And I will share my screen to try to tell you everything about our wonderful museum. Okay, let me see. Okay, no, let me see. Now, do you listen to me now?
Yes.
Okay. Well, as Lucy told you, I'm very excited and happy and very honored to present our Mexican Women's Museum, a first women's museum in Mexico and second in Latin America. Thanks to my FEMU colleagues for choosing me to present this very important project in this parallel event in the CFUW 67, and also my wonderful friends from CAMEUS, Canada and United States. Okay, and to get into context, let me tell you something about my country. Mexico, my dear friends, is in America, in a very strategical situation because it's part of North America, but it's also one of the largest countries in Latin America, both in terms of geographic size, population, and economic capacity. In size, is the 14th largest country in the world and the 3rd in North America. You see, it has an area of almost 2 million square meters and almost 130 inhabitants. It's the most populated Spanish-speaking country in the world. Its official name is Mexican United States. And you know, it could fit 24 European countries in our country. Well, now let me tell you about our Women's Museum. And I think it would be very interesting if I can tell you how it was planned and how we get to have it. And for this, I have to tell you that Dr. Patricia Galeana, she is a historian, is a specialist in gender issues and remarkably in the history of Mexican women and their human rights. Dr. Galeana has worked almost all her life in human rights, researching, teaching, and was selected to be part of the Human Rights Commission of Mexico City. So she thought in having a place where anyone could learn the Mexican history since the pre-Columbian stage until nowadays, but with a gender perspective. Now I have to tell you this data. In 1988, Patricia Galeana started the refoundation of the Mexican Federation of University Women. It was a reestablishment of an organization that was founded in 1925 and became part of the International Federation of University Women, now GWI, in 1929. And in 1990, it was officially FEMU. FEMU is a national organization of academics. Almost all of them are active university teachers. Since we are a national federation, we have members in many states of our country. And the most interesting, you know, is that there are all kinds of specialists in very different disciplines. That makes our organization very, very rich. We can participate in almost any project. FEMU supports and works towards the recognition of women having an essential role in the development of every community. I say this, as I told you, because all the members of FEMU participate with our expertise with our beloved museum. So in 1995, Patti Galeana presented in Brazil, as part of the United Nations Decade for Human Rights Education, a project of the creation of the Women's Museum in Mexico. During 15 days, nothing happened. 15 years, nothing happened. But our dream became true when we knocked at the National Autonomous University of Mexico, the UNAM, and that is the first university in the Americas established in 1540. It's a complex, diversified, and large institution with several campuses along the country. It has around 350,000 students and almost 40,000 academics. UNAM's main campus has been recognized by UNESCO as part of the World Heritage. So Dr. Jose Narro, a wonderful feminist that was the UNAM's dean in those days, understood the importance of having this project landed and gave us the University Printing House that was founded in 1937. It took almost 1 year to have it ready. So on the International Women's Day in March the 8th of 2011, the museum opened its doors to the public. This is the way Patti Galeana proposed to educate women, and not only women, because also men and children visit the museum and learn that education is the ship with the one. People can go as far as their education allows them. This mission is to contribute to end the patriarchal atavisms. There that are those who hide behind the violence against women, and to build a new culture of respect of human rights of every person, independently of their sex, preference, ideology, age, capacities, ethnic origin, or any other condition. So let me tell you, when the project was presented, it was known internationally, and was invited to become part of the International Association of Women's Museum. Then Patti became part of their board in Milano, Italy, in 2008. And since then, we have been actively working in this network. We participated in Bonn, Germany in 2014. And nowadays, I'm part of the board. And let me tell you that this is very interesting. There are around 100 museums all over the world, but all of them have 100 of women's museums all over the world, but almost all of them have special vocations in different historical times or activities. And ours, for example, here, the Mexican Women's Museum is one of its kind because it's the only one that presents the contribution that Mexican women has made to politics, economics, social or cultural issues since the pre-Columbian stage till our days. Now, well, our Women's Museum is like an open book for everyone. And let me tell you that it's very active. I'm going to tell you all the types of events we do. Almost one or twice per day, we have one event, very interesting. And the thing of it aims to revise the history of Mexico with a gender perspective, as I already told you, from the Columbian times to the present, in order to make women's role visible and to recognize their contribution in the foundation of a nation, of our nation, so that the history of Mexican women ceases to be a forgotten one. And now I'm going to present a video where you will see our museum. You will learn how it is. And let me see, just a second. Here. It's a short video. There it goes. I translated it also into English.
Welcome to the Women's Museum in Mexico City, which objective is to review the history of Mexico with a gender perspective, from pre-Columbian areas to the present time, to make visible the historical work of women and their contribution to the construction of their nation, so that the history of Mexican women ceases to be a forgotten one. This museum is an open book for everyone. It's a center of the diffusion of a new culture of equity and respect for women's human rights. The building that hosts it is a space with a great university tradition. It was founded in 1937 as the first university printing press in the historical center of the city, in order that university publications could have the best quality at the lowest cost. Here, the first magazine, the Gazette, and all the teaching and sharing materials of the university itself were printed. Women Museum tells the story of women from the original cultures to the present day. It is an interactive museum that makes use of electronic and audiovisual devices as well as 3D recreations. It has 8 rooms that explain the history of women from the original cultures nowadays. Number 1, equity, universal law of harmony. 2, dual world view of ancient Mexico. 3, Marianism in New Spain, women in the household. 4, insurgent women. 5, freedom and education. 6, from teachers to revolutionaries. Room number 7, women's citizenship. And the 8th, from the feminist revolution to the present day. The Women's Museum has works of art made expressly for the sites, such as those by Esther González, Guillermo Ceniceros, as well as the other emblematic works by Raúl Anguiano, Ángel Bolívar, or Pablo Higgins. It also has important sculptures by the artists Sebastián and Glenda Hecksher. The museum has the Clementina Díaz y de Obando Documentation Center and a specialized bookstore. It presents temporary exhibitions and carries out all kinds of cultural activities, such as courses, workshops, conferences, artistic, literary, and musical evenings, and the Gender Film Club, taught all by members of FEMU. We are waiting for you at the Women's Museum. Please come and visit us.
Well, that's it. And then I'm going to tell you something else about our wonderful museum. Since now we have, well, let me go in by, how to say, by order. Now we have 2 new rooms. The first, the 9th is the Suffragist and the United Front for Women's Rights have 2 new rooms. And women's. And the other one is the Waves of Feminism. And I want to show you real quick how many visitors have we had since 2011 till nowadays. Well, this is until the pandemic started, but I'm going to show you the other ones. See how many women, how many men, how many adults, and how many young people. You see, young people really loves to go because they can learn very, very much. And as I told you, we have had lots and lots and lots of activities. This has been since the opening till the pandemic. But now I can show you since the 20 and 21, and I also can show you because we have special events, conferences, and courses and workshops. We have book presentations, conversatories. We have this, we're part of the Night of Museums every month. Every Wednesday, in the last Wednesday of the month, we have this a night museum that we can make, or sometimes they are concerts or I don't know, exhibitions, lots and lots of things. And here is what we had by month in 2022. Later, I will show you what have been doing in 2023, but that would be later. Here it says we have been working virtually. We have worked a lot. But what I want to tell you, every month we have this cartelera. I don't know how to say it in English, but we have all the events that we have all the month during the month, and so you can go and see. And this is published in all the museums of Mexico City. And then we have our expansion. Given the number of visitors and attendees to the activities, it was necessary to have more space. In 2014, the government of the city made us a donation of a plot located in the back part of the museum with 314 square meters. The documentation center became a library. You're going to see it now in a few seconds. And now we have this big exhibition hall that turned to be an auditorium for 120 people. So I'm going to show you, and I want to tell you that, I'm going to show you. For example, I'm going to put on this video, because I want to be showing you all the places, the new places. This is part of the extension. Here you can see where the new exhibitions we have. See, look, we have this big room. We had this donation from Leonora Carrington. This is a sculpture. So I try to make, I think they are too fast, but you can have an idea of what we're making there. Let me see. I'm going to show you our, let me see. Look, this is the fourth wave of feminism. Let me put it. Here, as I told you, it's very interesting. Our museum is so nice and so modern. It has the greatest, the most late technology. Let me look. See. Because you see, we have this this technology that has been, just a second, that has been, for example, you don't have to touch anymore anything. You just place your hand and the screens, in the screen they appear everything. This is the ceiling, and this is the ninth room that I told you, the suffragist and the unique friend for women's rights. See, and these are big screens. It's full of screens where you can just come and learn. And let me see. This, for example, this is also one of the waves. But look how beautiful it is. We have the history by decades, and then it opens, and then we have all these. Can you see all the screens? You just, in these bells, you just stand beneath the bell, and then it starts telling you all the history. It's a very thing that is very, very expensive. That's why there are very few museums that have this kind of technology. And then we have screens. So it's not, now it's a big museum, but it's a huge museum because you can go inside all those screens and see all that information, all that important information that it's just coming on front of you, and you don't have to say it, to touch anything. You just have to raise your hand, and that's it. Let me see another one here. I think, I don't know if I and I'll search for another one. And I think my time is over, isn't it? Yes, because look, for example, in this screen, it's so nice.
Es que lo que pasa es que hay que traer los audífonos.
Look, see, you just touch a window and it opens, and it's telling you all the story you want to listen. You have to listen. They tell you the story of women. You have to go. It's so wonderful. It's so modern. Look,
Amazing.
Yes, and also it's really amazing. So it's amazing, and it's amusement. You can go and have a good time. Well, I think my time is over, and I hope I could show you our museum. And yes, I finished sharing. So thank you for listening and for watching.
Thank you, Glenda. Thank you.
Hey, Glenda, this was fascinating. I think we would all like to come to your museum, and maybe someday we will.
Oh, yes, we have to figure that out.
We'll do it.
Yes.
I'm now going to call on Lucia to handle the Q&A. I noticed you've been putting questions in chat, and please continue to do so.
Yes,
Right.
I'll read some of the questions and congratulations. First of all, regarding Alison's presentation. There were many words saying, for example, fantastic, excellent, inspiring. Elizabeth Christensen from Oregon asks a question. Is literature chosen by the administration or by you or by your students? Because you mentioned that, she would like to know. And then, for example, Joy says, do you have an online course for adults, Alison? And some of the congratulations saying that they hope our grandchildren have teachers like you. So what do you answer, Alison?
Oh, well, first, thank you all. That was very kind. In terms of the literature, I tend to pick things up. My administration has trusted me with that because they know I read widely. We do have a committee at the government level that puts together an annotated bibliography of a selection of books. And so that's something, I am on that committee, and I recommend books for it. And so that annotated bibliography goes out to all of the schools. But past that, I tend to purchase from outside of that as well, sometimes on student suggestions, sometimes on things that I've read. I try to focus a lot on books that are non-trauma based, that are diverse, but are non-trauma based, because I think that diversity often gets canceled out if all of the books about being, all the books about diversity are all about being persecuted for that diversity. But yeah, so my administration has been very open to anything that I've wished to purchase and put in my classroom. So I tend to do book talks with the students, and if they want to do something that they're interested in reading instead and can provide a copy, then that's all great too. I really feel that there's no wrong way to offer choice in literature, and that I would rather have a book interview and get book projects on a book I haven't read than to get them on ones that I've read but they haven't because they weren't interested or engaged. So that's how I tend to do that. And in terms of adult classes, no, but yeah, that's, I'm always open for questions and interactions, especially on Twitter and so on. And I think there's a one-pager that can be distributed to the participants of this particular session that has some information about me, as well as some of the topics on which I spoke, and my Twitter handle and my work email, if anyone is interested.
Thank you, Alison. I see another hand raised. Shaila, is this a question for Alison?
Thank you, Lucia. Yes, it's a question for Alison and for Margie, and it pertains, since we are doing science and technology at CSW, how is social emotional learning being integrated into our education overall and into the classrooms? And what is being done to make sure that no girl is left behind? Because this is the key issue here. Thank you.
You want to go first, Alison?
Oh, pardon?
Go
Sorry.
first.
Okay, I know for me, in terms of the No Girl Left Behind, I'll start with that. I start my classes by talking to them about my experience within high school and university. And I tell them how when I was in high school, I studied 1, maybe 2 books by females, and in university there were none. within my English degree. I think we did a short story by a female. And I tell them up front, this will not be a course about dead white males, that there will be females, males, everybody represented within the literature. And I work hard to ensure that that is the case, so that students are represented and that they see that females have just as much literary heritage and impact as males. It's made me very happy when at times students have decided to do passion projects on poets such as Emily Dickinson, because they heard about her in my class and went, oh, wow, that's, you know, I need now to learn more because she's just sparked something in me. So I try to ensure that everyone is represented and that students can see themselves and others, that the literature that we do is a mirror, but also an open door to the world, and ensuring that they know that females are part of that. And with that, naturally, a lot of social emotional learning comes in terms of the discussions and how we approach things. But yeah, I try to make sure that females know that they are part of this and that they are part of the world of literature and deserve to be there. And so Margie, now you.
So one of the organizations that I work with locally is Seroptimist International, and there is a chapter here in Whittier, and they have pre-COVID, they were on my campus every year doing a Dream It, Be It campaign with the girls on the campus at my continuation school, and also with my teen parents when I was running that program. And then in terms of SEL, my background, I have a master's degree in counseling, and I started in education, not as a teacher, but as a counselor. So I'm real comfortable talking about some of that stuff. So we've modeled that, my administrative team and I, by opening each of our staff meetings with a social emotional learning activity of some sort that teachers can then take back to their own classrooms. We've raffled off a bunch of conversation starter cards that they can use in their classrooms. I've had teachers model different activities that they do. There's a free app available here in the United States called Mood Meter that several of my teachers use. It allows students to identify what quadrant they're in and then what graded color, and it gives them an adjective, an emotional adjective, like frustrated or excited or energetic. And if that feels right to them, terrific. If not, they can pick another, kind of keep going within those choices to see what feels good to them. We also, with our social worker on campus, we do Wellness Wednesdays, which my school counselors also participate in. So every Wednesday, a different one of them puts out a particular topic and a one-page handout, and it gets blasted out to all the students and all of their families through our email system. And I think, what else are we using? We have a couple of different social emotional curricula that we use. One of them is an online web-based program. And so, yeah, there are a couple of different, there are different choices. We also, in addition to having the social worker on campus full-time, we have social worker interns who are working toward their MSW, who are doing some of their community service, some of their hours that they have to do to get licensed here on our campus as well. Oh, and then the other organization that we use here in California that's fantastic is called Project Sister. And they were just on campus last month. It was Relationship Violence Awareness Month. And so they were doing presentations on healthy relationships to students. And then I'm going to bring them back next month for my adult students as well.
Thank you, Margie. There's a question for you, besides many congratulations from the public. But you mentioned, could you please mute your microphones, please? Thank you very much. Margie, you mentioned Maslow before Bloom. Could you expand a little bit on that and human capacities in digital education, but especially about your reference to Maslow before Bloom, please.
Absolutely. So Maslow was a developmental psychologist, published back in the 1960s. He's been around a long time. And essentially his approach basically talked about the fact that first you have to meet people's physical and physiological needs, that people that feel unsafe, that people that are hungry, that they can't reach their full potential. And so it begins with people being hungry. And so recognizing during COVID some of those situations, that's where we were so excited to see the federal government open up the free and reduced lunch program to everyone and go beyond and provide. We had drive-through food distributions for families, and we coordinated with the other local school districts so that people didn't have to drive all the way across town just because one of their kids was in the kindergarten class somewhere and another one was on a different campus with sixth graders and a third one was at my school. And then the security and the belonging, people need to feel that they're part of a community. They need to feel valued. And that's particularly important for teenagers. They are so about the relationships. And coming back from COVID, it was so interesting when we first went out on COVID, my introverted teachers had a very hard time with the fact that they couldn't escape their families when they were working. They didn't have that downtime driving to and from work. Like they wanted to know how quickly can I be physically back in my classroom and online, just because I got to get away from my spouse, my kids, whatever. My extroverted teachers, who are the ones I expected to have difficulty, they were not feeling the love from their kids online. And they were not getting that connection and that excitement that you get from presenting to a room full of people. So everybody struggled with that. And we did not mandate that our students turn on cameras when they were on Zoom during distance learning, because I recognize that a lot of my students live doubled up, multiple families to a household, and it just wasn't comfortable for the students to show their surrounding right at that moment in time. So it was a choice that we allowed the students to make, but that also made it more difficult because the teachers didn't even know what some of the kids looked like. So when we came back, it was just a really big deal about, I straight up told my teachers that first week that we were back in the fall of 2021, I don't want you doing anything academic for the first 5 days of school. I want you to do nothing but social, emotional, connect with the kids, learn about them, let them learn about each other. We need to retrain them how to be students. We need to retrain them about socialized behavior. What are the behaviors that we want to see on campus? So we spent a solid week on that before we moved into the academic stuff. And Bloom's taxonomy is really gave teachers a language for talking about assessment and talking about academic rigor. So that's where that comes from, that it is more difficult. It is easier to know something, to be able to define a word than it is to apply it or to analyze a piece of literature, as Alison talked about. That's a higher level thinking skill. So even when we started moving back into that instruction, it was like, okay, even though when I was in your classroom pre-COVID, I would be really unhappy to see you doing some basic rote stuff. Right now, we got to just kind of meet the kids where they are and raise the level of academic rigor as we go along, but don't dive right back into the level of academic rigor that we were expecting of the students pre-COVID.
Yes, you're right, Margie. This is the same in Mexico, of course, as I'm a teacher at the National University of Mexico. And of course, inequalities are there. And now we have to address these students in a different way. But what you have said applies. So thank you very much. I have some questions for Glenda. If there's nothing else for Margie, I have some questions for Glenda. Glenda, first of all, congratulations. Art is a powerful communicator. How many visitors have come back to the museum after COVID? That's one question. And Trish from Ontario says, She's never been to Mexico, but she would like to know if courses at the museum are given online, and if they are given in English. And Shirley Rundell, our friend, has visited the museum, and she always says hello to her Mexican friends. Thank you, Shirley. So Glenda, please.
Well, I'm going to share again. Of course, lots of people has come back to our museum because look, sorry, here it is. Here. We had in 2022, it says the assistance of the public to the museum. It was in January, nobody, or February, but in March they started coming. The total was 170, 111 women, men 59. In April, 1,069, 700 and almost 750 women, and 300 and something men. In May, they have been fluctuating because, you know, see, what we have now is that we are still doing the virtual events. So we have them hybrid, or how do you say it, híbridos. So we can have both. So lots of times people go to the museum, and some others, they just get to see them in by the computers or their mobile phones. So, but as I told you, we have all the time lots of events, and I think it's very, 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 how do you say, active. I don't know, ahorita. Yes, I don't know if you want to say something, because here my daughter is telling me that Janet Westbrook asked, we need more art programs in school. It is good for the soul and the mind. Yes, I completely agree about that. Yes, but I'm listening, my dear Lucy.
No, I don't know if my fellow colleagues, hostess have something else that you would like to ask?
Or, well, are there any...
Lisa? Oh.
Faye, yes, please.
Go ahead. I would like to ask the three presenters if they had any problems with sexual harassment or negativity in their technology, using institutional technology. Many of us just came back from New York, and there were several presentations related to negativity and sexual harassment related to women and girls. And I wonder if not only just sexual harassment, but in terms of technology that would negatively affect students.
Can I answer something? Well, what we do to avoid that is to have everyone registered. Because if not, sometimes someone goes into your computer and makes horrible things, and that's terrible. So I think if you take, you're very, very strict in joining and in admitting only those who are really registered, and they made the registration on time, that will lower a little bit that problem. Because yes, I've been in some other Zooms, for example, or presentations that they go in and they present awful things and music that is not music. I don't know if you're talking about that, my dear Faye.
I think you've answered the question from the museum. So you keep people registered, and you know who's coming in, and you don't accept others that aren't registered.
And also, you know what we do? We accept now what we're doing. We only accept those we know in the Zoom meetings. And then we put it in our Facebook page and it's alive. So we can have many people that writes their comments and ask questions or whatever, but they cannot interfere with the Zoom. They cannot go into the meeting. They only can access by Facebook, and they don't have any possibility to go in the session.
In terms of how things are here, I know when we first went online, there was some, I guess, Meet bombing, and because we used Google Meet and so on. It wasn't necessarily directed towards females or female teachers. It was more, I think, teenagers who all of a sudden could join classes and come in and, you know, make some kind of statement and then leave. And so NLESD, my school board, addressed this fairly quickly, and more securities were built in, including tracking who had been on it. So if someone did get in, then we had their email address and so on. Our biggest issue actually was around our students who were transitioning, because the emails indicated their dead names. And so while everyone might be calling them by their new chosen name, their email and thus their login and what was displayed on Google Meet was their dead name, and they were uncomfortable in that situation. And that was something that once it came to the board's attention, became something that was fixed quite quickly, that students had an outlet to be able to go, hey, I would prefer, or my name currently is this, or my name now is this. Could you please ensure that it's correct? So that as it's displayed to others, it's correct. Because we did have a number of students who did not feel comfortable going to class because it was not representative. Their ID was not representative of who they were. So that was the bigger issue we found in terms of an issue. The other stuff that was luckily squashed quite quickly. Though I will say, in terms of outside of the computer, I do still get some looks when I am like, oh, well, the tech thing is this. And, you know, especially if it's a new tech person, usually a guy, they look at me like, oh, you think you know what you're doing, hey, right? But it's less sexual harassment and more proving myself to the tech people each time.
And I would agree, we, as a school district, we increased the number of folks that work in the technology department. And some of those things did occur in the very beginning, particularly with teachers that set their Zoom to allow anyone to enter. So they had to reset it to allow only someone with a district email to enter, and all of our students have district emails. So it basically got shut down pretty quickly. I will say there were a few suspensions that occurred, honestly, and some students that were removed from classes because their behavior was inappropriate. But as Alison said, more teenagers being teenagers and trying to get away with what they could get away with. And a lot of education of the teachers. It was for a little while there, we were getting daily updates from the technology department about, okay, here are screenshots, here's another video link of how to set up your Zoom to protect yourself and protect students. And that was the other reason that we moved quickly to Google Voice, so that all text messaging that was going back and forth between staff and students was happening in a controlled environment where people could monitor it.
Okay, thank you, Margie. And Lucia, thank you very much to you and Paige for organizing the Q&A. And we now have 3 concluding remarks, one each by our 3 presidents of the groups that make up CAMEUS. So I'll call on Joy Hurst, followed by Mirella Feingold and Faye Weber.
No,
Sally
thank
Chamberlain.
you.
And
Thank you for-
after they finish, Faye Weber. Can we have all of the microphones muted, please, except for the All right, I think we're okay now. Go ahead, Joy, please.
Thank you so much, Grace. One of the things that really excites me about UNCSW, whether the events are in person or virtual, is how the Commission provides a platform for women change makers from around the globe to gather for dialogue. So a big thank you goes out to our 3 presenters. There's so much that I would like to comment on, but given the time constraints, I will be brief. Alison, I very much appreciate the important distinction you've made between engagement and empowerment. I'm also drawn to the competency framework that you identified to support deep learning. It's important to talk about the different kinds of learning, and what we all want to see is deep learning. It's fantastic that you've used the time during COVID for reflection, research, and planning. Truly a transformative approach to teaching and learning. Margie, at UNCSW, there's always new terms. For me, at Promise, students is a new term. Congratulations for being student focused, such as adding social and mental health supports, free lunch, and providing structures and resources specifically for marginalized students. Leading to rigor with relationship first. What a novel idea. This is fantastic. And thank you for sharing with us shakeuplearning.com. What a great resource for educators. During COVID, I think there's been so much focus on students. It's easy for the needs of teachers to fade into the background. But in fact, ensuring that educators have the resources they need is essential to quality education. Glenda, thank you for again reinforcing how art can be a powerful avenue for lifelong learning, and museums can be a place and space to promote social change. The history you've provided has given an important context for FEMU's strategic relationships and influence. You can hear many people on the call, myself included, are really looking forward to visiting the Women's Museum in Mexico and learning more about women's museums in other parts of the world. Lastly, a special thank you to today's organizing committee for bringing together these impressive speakers and organizing this session. It speaks to the wonderful collaboration that has been achieved by CAMEUS. So thank you very much.
Okay, Mirella, if you could come on, please.
Yes, of course. Hello. I will speak in Spanish, and I ask Lucia to translate, please. Bueno, ha sido un gusto verlas nuevamente y agradezco a las personas que organizaron la sesión del día de hoy tan importante, en donde se ve o se observa que la tecnología ha tenido que avanzar a pasos agigantados precisamente para tener las respuestas a estos problemas de educación con los que nos enfrentamos cada día las personas que nos dedicamos a esto, precisamente a enseñar, y en este caso las universitarias. Quiero también decirles que allá en Nueva York, pues la firma de este convenio de CAMEUS fue muy gratificante, y que pues gracias a todas ustedes por haberlo hecho posible. Solamente me resta agradecer su presencia, su contribución tan importante a estos temas e invitarlas a que nos visiten. El Museo de la Mujer ha sido un lugar excepcional para poder compartir los conocimientos. Entonces las esperamos a todas para que vengan a conocer este museo y para vernos también de nuevo. Muchas gracias. Buenas tardes.
You want me to say
Um,
brief more or less what she said?
Lucia?
Lucia, sorry.
Lucia.
Lucia, please.
Lucia.
So, Mireya thanks you for your participation this morning, afternoon, evening, and for giving voice to university women. The new CAMEUS MOU was very important to be signed in New York and the mission of Mexico to the United Nations. And it was an important ceremony. She would like, Mireya would like, to invite all of you to Mexico City, and to visit the Women's Museum in Mexico. Please do come, and well, we will greet you there with all our hearts. And as I always say, mi casa es su casa.
Thank you very much, Lucia, for the translation. I'm now going to call on the new president of WGUSA, Sally Chamberlain, and she's going to speak.
I am here and I want to say thank you for allowing me to have a couple words at the end of this wonderful presentation. As a career educator, I was very, very excited to hear the speakers talk about what we learned and what might be the new normal after COVID and the lockdown. And what I did put in the chat, and I would like to reiterate again now, is that I'm so happy that they talked in positive terms, because it seems as if education, at least in the United States right now, K-12 is getting a lot of hard hits. And it's good to hear and see such committed educators out there working with our children. And it gives me, and I should give everyone on this call and conference, good hope for the next generation, that we have such great people working for us and for our future generations. I just would like to thank the steering committee of CAMEUS. Finally, we got this off the ground. It took a few years. It's a wonderful collaboration. I know that we will do many things for our North American group. And I thank all of the GWI members that are on this conference today for participating and seeing what can be done when we collaborate together. So thank you again, and thank you for this opportunity to talk.
Thank you, Sally. And before I call on Faye Weber to finish up, I'd like to say that we had originally applied for a 90-minute session. And yesterday we discovered that we had been given 120 minutes. So I said, oh, no problem. Our speakers and our registrants can certainly handle the extra 30 minutes, and you have. And I'd like to thank you for that. So now I call on Faye, please.
Yes, and that made, I was the timekeeper, and I was delighted that we had the additional time. So that was definitely a bonus. So special thanks to Alison, Margie, and Glenda for your just insightful, creative, and transitional talk. So special thanks for you and all of the work you have done behind the scenes to give such a wonderful presentation, and the wonderful human beings you are, where you care about students and teachers and communities. And thank you for your great contributions. I'd like to thank Paige for hosting our event today, and Grace for being moderator, and Barbara, even a little under the weather, for giving us the introduction on CAMEUS. And I think the three amigos that have, you've noticed that we're all past presidents or past something of Lucia and Grace and myself. The three amigos pulling all of the events of the past week together, and then all of the committee members and that have just done such a wonderful job. You give them a job and it's done. This has just been a great event for me, and I hope it is for you. And most importantly, every one of you who have come and participated in today. Without you, there would be no parallel event. And special thanks for CSW67 for making this event possible. Thank you and have a good day.
And I think now that Paige is going to have a photograph taken. So Paige, if you could come on, please.
Yes, if you wouldn't mind, if you'd like to be in the photo, you turn your cameras on and we can all be in it together. I'll give you a few seconds. Okay, I'm gonna take a couple because we've got a couple people here. So ready? 1, 2, 3. Okay, let's see. Okay, one more. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so it's time
Thank
to
you,
say
Paige.
thank you very
Thank you
much.
so much, Paige.
Thank you so much. It was
Thank you.
wonderful and inspiring, insightful. Thank you very much. You've learned a lot. Would you like if we can implement some of those things we've learned today in our own countries? Thank you very much. Hoping to be in Mexico one day to see the women's Zoom.
We'll
Thank
be
you
there
so much.
waiting for you.
And we have to make it happen for all of you to come to our museum and to be with us, my friends.
Please,
Thank you,
would
Glenda.
love to do. I would love to be. Send us an invitation and we will make it. Organize an event, we will come.
Okay, we will do.
Friendship trip. Museum. Elise Russo and I made a trip there 4 or 5 years ago, and it's unbelievable what this group of FEMU women have done. So it's worth the trip.
We had
We
our
need
triennial,
one.
we had a GWI triennial about 5, 6 years ago.